friends in Colorado, we all thought we were mountain men.
Just read so well. The original title was called 10 Soldiers, since moved on to Red Dawn.
I mean, the idea of it was really compelling. I think everyone had had that kind of paranoia at that time.
The year is 1984. The Cold War is suffocating America. Every morning, people wake up genuinely unsure whether today might be the day the Soviet Union makes its move. And then, in the middle of all that fear, a movie walks into theaters and does something no film had ever dared to do before. It looks every American in the eye and says, what if the invasion already started? Red Dawn didn't just entertain audiences. It disturbed them. It shook them. It made them walk out of theaters looking over their shoulders. And behind that film, behind every explosion, every battle cry, every frozen mountain sequence, were secrets so wild, so bizarre, and so deeply fascinating that most fans have no idea they exist even 40 years later. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on all 25 of them. And trust us, by the time we reach number 21, your jaw will be on the floor. Stay locked in, because this story gets stranger with every single secret. Secret number 1, the birth of PG-13. Before Red Dawn ever hit theaters, Hollywood had a problem it couldn't ignore. Violent, intense content was sneaking through under PG labels, and parents across America were furious. Steven Spielberg, still fielding complaints about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins, publicly pushed the MPAA to create a new middle ground between PG and R. The industry knew something had to give, but no one could agree on what that something should look like. Then Red Dawn arrived, with its intense battle sequences, wartime brutality, an unflinching portrayal of occupied America. The film became the very first movie ever released with the brand new PG-13 rating. That single decision wasn't just a bureaucratic box check. It was a direct response to a culture that was rapidly shifting in what it expected and what it feared from cinema. Think about what that really means. Every superhero blockbuster you've ever seen, every thriller, every action franchise, every PG-13 film that pushed the edge of what mainstream audiences could watch, all of it traces its lineage back to this movie. Red Dawn didn't just get a rating, it created one, and the entire industry was reshaped overnight. Secret number 2, branded the most violent movie ever made. Now here's where things start getting uncomfortable. Watchdog organizations didn't just dislike Red Dawn, they came after it with data. They sat down, watched every minute of the film, and meticulously tracked every single act of violence on screen. Their conclusion? Approximately 134 acts of violence per hour. That number exploded into headlines across the country and ignited a national debate about where Hollywood's moral limits actually were.
Some form of survival.
And then, the Guinness Book of World Records made it official. Red Dawn was the most violent movie ever made at that time. Editorial columns raged. Television segments devoted entire blocks to the question of whether Hollywood had finally gone too far. Parental advocacy groups used the film as their rallying point, arguing that not even the new PG-13 rating could justify what was on screen. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. All that outrage became the greatest free advertising campaign in the film's history. Audiences who had never heard of Red Dawn suddenly needed to know what all the fuss was about. The more people condemned it, the more tickets it sold. Sometimes controversy isn't the enemy of success. Sometimes it's the engine. Secret number 3, from 10 soldiers to war epic. Before a single camera rolled, this film had a completely different identity. The original screenplay was titled 10 Soldiers, and it was nothing like what you've seen. It was quiet, restrained, a contemplative, almost anti-war meditation on a small group of resistance fighters and the psychological weight of conflict. No spectacle, no chest-thumping patriotism, just the human cost of war, told intimately. Then John Milius walked through the door. Milius, a director with a reputation for bold storytelling and zero apologies, didn't just tweak the script, he rebuilt it from the ground up. He expanded the scope dramatically, turned the modest character study into a full-scale guerrilla epic, made the invasion scenarios enormous, the action sequences relentless, and the ideological message as aggressive as anything Hollywood had produced in years. The transformation was so complete that the original screenplay is essentially unrecognizable in the final film. It went from a meditation on war to a war cry, and that shift, the moment a quiet story became a thunderclap, is exactly why Red Dawn landed with such seismic force on audiences who were already primed by Cold War anxiety to receive it. Secret number 4. Haig's advice was too extreme. Here's a question most people never think to ask. When you're making a fictional invasion film during the Cold War, who do you call for advice? Apparently, you call a former Secretary of State of the United States. Alexander Haig, one of the most senior foreign policy figures in modern American history, was brought in to consult on how a foreign invasion of American soil might realistically unfold. His involvement gave the production a layer of credibility that most action films couldn't dream of claiming. But here's the part that should make you stop and think. According to accounts from inside the production, Haig's suggestions were more extreme than what actually ended up on screen. His scenarios reportedly pushed the story into territory that even Milius, a filmmaker not known for pulling punches, found too intense. There were genuine concerns that following Haig's guidance too closely would tip the film from patriotic thriller into outright propaganda. So let that sink in. A former top government official sat down with a Hollywood production team and treated a fictional invasion scenario as a genuine strategic exercise. The line between Cold War fiction and Cold War reality wasn't blurring. It had already disappeared. That detail alone tells you everything about the era in which this film was born. Secret number 5. Boot camp before filming. The young cast of Red Dawn didn't just learn lines and hit their marks. Before a single scene was filmed, every one of them was put through a military-style boot camp that was designed to be genuinely grueling. They trained outdoors in rugged conditions. They handled real weapons under professional supervision. They learned survival techniques, hiked through harsh terrain, and slept in rough outdoor conditions that mirrored exactly what their characters were supposed to endure on screen. No shortcuts, no comfortable trailers waiting at the end of a hard day. By the time filming began, these young actors weren't performing soldiers. They moved like a unit that had actually been through something together. The bond you feel watching them on screen, that unspoken trust, that shared weight, wasn't manufactured by clever editing or carefully scripted dialogue. It was earned through weeks of physical and emotional strain that none of them could fake. That boot camp decision is one of the smartest creative choices the production ever made, and most viewers have no idea it happened. Secret number 6. The movie that made them stars. Stop and think about this lineup for a moment. Patrick Swayze, Jennifer Grey, Leah Thompson, Charlie Sheen, all of them in the same film, before any of them were household names, before Dirty Dancing, before Ferris Bueller, before Platoon, before any of it. For Charlie Sheen, this wasn't just an early role. It was his very first feature film, his starting line. Critics were sharply divided on the movie itself, but almost universally agreed on one thing. These young performers had something special. Studio executives noticed, casting directors took note, and within just a few years, each of them landed the defining roles of their careers. What makes it even more extraordinary is the chemistry. That boot camp forged something between them that no amount of rehearsal could manufacture. They weren't acting like a unit. They were one. And watching Red Dawn now, knowing what all of them would go on to become, turns the film into something that feels almost prophetic. A frame that captured lightning before anyone knew it was lightning. Secret number 7. Frostbite in the mountains. Filming took place in the mountains of New Mexico, and the weather was not cooperating. Bitterly cold conditions pushed cast and crew to their absolute physical limits. What audiences read as convincing winter survival scenes were often something far more literal than that, real misery playing out in real time in front of a camera. Patrick Swayze suffered the worst of it. During extended outdoor shoots, the cold became so severe that he developed frostbite, an injury that reportedly lingered well beyond the end of production. This wasn't a controlled studio set with warming stations on standby. The cast was expected to endure the conditions, and Swayze did exactly that. without complaint, without pulling back from the work. The brutal environment delivered something no budget could have purchased: raw, bone-deep authenticity. When you watch those characters huddle for warmth and push through the snow, you're not watching actors simulate suffering. You're watching people who were actually cold, actually exhausted, actually at their limits. Nature punished the production, and the production became legendary partly because of it. Secret number 8. The love scene that disappeared. Not every scene that gets filmed makes it to the screen, and one of the most significant deletions in Red Dawn's history involved a romantic scene between Leah Thompson and C. Thomas Howell. The sequence was fully shot and originally intended to deepen the emotional connection between their characters, adding human warmth and vulnerability to the surrounding chaos of war. The studio cut it, not for content reasons, but for pace. The film's relentless momentum was considered its greatest commercial asset, and executives feared that a slower, emotionally intimate scene would shatter the rhythm. There were also concerns about tonal consistency. A tender moment wedged into the middle of guerrilla warfare might undercut the intensity the film had been building so carefully. But that cut had consequences. Without that scene, the relationship between the two characters feels more ambiguous than it was designed to be. Certain emotional beats later in the film lose their foundation. Something is missing, and most viewers feel it without ever being able to identify exactly what it is. It's a ghost in the edit, a missing piece that quietly reshapes the entire experience. Secret number 9. Sheen's explosion injury. In the 1980s, practical effects weren't simulated. They were detonated. Real charges, real shrapnel, real concussive force, feet away from the cast. During the filming of a large explosion sequence, flying debris struck Charlie Sheen directly in the eye. The injury was serious enough to halt production while he received medical treatment and recovered. And in that moment, the danger wasn't theoretical. It was immediate and visceral, and could easily have been catastrophic. There were no digital safety nets in this era, no CGI stand-ins, no way to fully protect performers from the chaos of live pyrotechnics when wind shifted unexpectedly, or a shrapnel path deviated by inches. Every explosion you see in that film was real. Every collapsing structure involved actual charges, and the price of that authenticity was measured in physical injury, an eye hit that could have ended a career before it truly began. When you watch those battle sequences now knowing this, they hit differently. Secret number 10. Romance turned real tension. Behind the camera, not everything was going smoothly. A planned intimate scene between Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey was supposed to add emotional depth to their characters' relationship on screen.
Family and fans are grieving the loss of Patrick Swayze's younger brother, Sean, according to a death certificate obtained by People.
But when the time came to film it, the atmosphere between the two actors turned genuinely tense. Miscommunication, exhaustion from the punishing shoot. Whatever the exact cause, the discomfort was obvious enough that the filmmakers abandoned the scene entirely rather than force something that clearly wasn't working. And here's the extraordinary irony. Those two actors, with that genuine friction between them, were later cast together in Dirty Dancing, and their chemistry became one of the most iconic in cinema history. What started as awkward tension on the set of a war film became the electric foundation for one of the most beloved romantic films ever made. Sometimes the friction is the fuel. Sometimes the difficult dynamic is exactly what makes the magic. Secret number 11. The parachute drop chaos. The iconic parachute drop sequence is one of the most memorable moments in the film, and it almost turned into a genuine disaster. Strong winds during filming threw the entire operation into chaos. Paratroopers who were supposed to land in precise choreographed positions were blown wildly off course, scattering across the New Mexico landscape in ways nobody had planned for. One jumper landed directly in a tree, startling nearby locals who had no idea what was happening. Another drifted so far from the designated landing zone that he was temporarily detained by civilians who thought something far more serious was unfolding. The production crew scrambled. The confusion was real, and then, unexpectedly, something clicked. The chaos of the botched drop accidentally mirrored exactly the kind of disorienting, uncontrollable disorder that an actual airborne invasion would produce. What should have been a tightly controlled stunt became an accidental masterclass in authenticity. The sequence's raw, unpolished energy on screen? That wasn't direction. That was luck, disaster, and unplanned reality colliding at exactly the right moment. Secret number 12. Tanks that fooled officials. The Soviet tanks rolling through American streets in Red Dawn were not real Soviet hardware. They were modified civilian vehicles, carefully redesigned and painted with authentic-looking military markings to sell the illusion of enemy armor occupying American soil. The prop department's work was so meticulous, so convincing, that the vehicles reportedly attracted the attention of intelligence officials who wanted a closer look at what appeared to be genuine Soviet military equipment moving through a small American town. Whether those accounts have been embellished over the years is hard to verify definitively, but the fact that the stories have persisted for 4 decades speaks to the craftsmanship involved. No digital enhancements, no CGI polish. Every detail had to hold up under natural light, from every angle, in person. The prop team delivered work that made audiences, and apparently certain officials, believe what they were seeing was real. For a mid-budget 1980s action film, that level of practical artistry was extraordinary. Secret number 13. The McDonald's scene cut for tragedy. This one is haunting. A deleted scene showed invading soldiers walking into a McDonald's restaurant and attempting to order food. The dark humor of the moment, military occupation colliding with fast food culture, was designed to highlight the jarring absurdity of foreign forces on American soil. The scene was cut because of a real tragedy. Just weeks before the film's scheduled release, a mass shooting occurred at a McDonald's in San Ysidro, California, killing 21 people. It was one of the deadliest mass shootings in American history up to that point. The filmmakers and studio acted immediately, including a scene set inside that restaurant chain in the wake of that tragedy. Was simply not something they were willing to do. The decision was swift. There was no debate about softening it or reworking it. It was gone. Its removal quietly changed the film's entire tonal landscape. Without that moment of dark comedy, Red Dawn plays as an unrelenting, consistently intense experience from opening to credits, and the deleted scene itself remains one of the most discussed pieces of lost footage from the decade, a reminder that the real world can reach into a film and reshape it in ways no one could have predicted. Secret number 14. When the town felt invaded. The production filmed in Las Vegas, New Mexico, and the experience of watching a foreign military occupation being staged in your town in 1984 was not something the local residents were prepared for. This was the height of the Cold War. The threat of real conflict felt tangible and close in a way that is genuinely difficult to grasp from the distance of today. When residents looked out their windows and saw foreign military uniforms, armored vehicles, and staged explosions rolling through their streets, some of them didn't immediately process it as a film shoot. The confusion was real. The alarm was real. For a brief, unsettling period, fiction and reality overlapped in a way that gave an entire community a visceral preview of the anxiety the film was designed to evoke. If staged warfare could rattle a town that theoretically knew it was fake, then the film's premise wasn't just dramatically effective, it was psychologically precise. It didn't invent fear, it gave existing fear a shape. Secret number 15. Hidden Soviet propaganda clip. Blink and you'll miss this one, and most people do, even on repeat viewings. During a camp scene, authentic Soviet propaganda footage plays faintly on a screen in the background. It is never highlighted, never referenced in the dialogue. The camera doesn't linger on it. For the vast majority of viewers, it is completely invisible. But it was placed there deliberately. That flickering footage communicates volumes about the occupiers' methods, the use of media to control, to reshape, to influence, without a single word of explanation or a single moment of on-screen emphasis. It rewards attentive viewers with a deeper layer of understanding about the world the film has constructed. It's the kind of quiet, invisible, creative decision that separates thoughtful filmmaking from surface-level action spectacle. While the rest of the movie is built on explosive set pieces and intense confrontations, this one background detail adds an ironic, unsettling layer that recontextualizes everything happening in that camp scene. Have you ever noticed it? If not, watch again, carefully. Secret number 16. TV edits soften the impact. When Red Dawn moved from theaters to network television, it underwent a transformation that most viewers never knew about. Several of the most visceral, intense sequences were heavily trimmed or removed entirely to meet broadcast standards. Entire scenes were restructured, dialogue was altered, key confrontations lost their edge. For many younger viewers, the television version was the only version they ever knew, and what they saw was, essentially, a diluted shadow of the film the director had actually made, a version with its sharpest edges carefully filed down to fit comfortably inside a living room broadcast. This was a film officially recognized as the most violent ever made at the time. The contrast between its theatrical cut and what aired on television wasn't subtle. It was the difference between experiencing the film as it was designed to be experienced and receiving a carefully sanitized approximation of it. For a generation of fans who grew up watching the TV version, discovering the full theatrical cut for the first time is genuinely revelatory. Secret number 17. Wolverines became a rally cry. Some movie lines fade from memory the moment the credits roll, and then there are lines that escape the screen entirely and take on lives of their own in the real world. Wolverines, shouted by the young resistance fighters as they charged into combat, that single word broke free from the film almost immediately after release. It became a symbol of defiance, a battle cry that transcended its fictional context and embedded itself so deeply into popular culture that even people who have never seen Red Dawn recognize its cultural weight. For decades after the film's release, audiences have shouted it at conventions, at cast members in public, at each other during moments that called for defiance. It captured something universal, that primal surge of refusing to back down against impossible odds, that resonated far beyond the specific Cold War narrative of the film. What makes it extraordinary is that no marketing team manufactured it. No advertising campaign pushed it into the culture. It simply struck a nerve with audiences and was passed organically from one generation of fans to the next. 40 years later, it still echoes. Very few two-word phrases in cinema history can claim that. Secret number 18. Milius and the gun on his desk. Director John Milius was not a man who did anything subtly. Known throughout Hollywood for his larger-than-life presence and confrontational public persona, Milius treated provocation as a natural extension of his creative process.
John Milius is a legendary Hollywood director who recognized Arnold's potential, gave him a sword and a loincloth.
For him, filmmaking and personal philosophy were one and the same, inseparable, uncompromising, and unapologetic. During press interviews around the film's release, Milius reportedly kept a firearm visibly placed on his desk, deliberately, calculatedly. It wasn't careless, it was a statement, a declaration of exactly who he was and what he stood for, communicated before a single interview question was asked. The gesture perfectly matched the film he had just made. It blurred the line between the filmmaker and his work in a way that made journalists take notice immediately. Milius knew Red Dawn would attract fierce criticism. He knew the political provocations would generate backlash, and rather than backing away from that, he leaned directly into it, maintaining the same defiant, uncompromising energy in front of the press that defined every frame of the movie itself. Whether you agreed with Milius or not, you could not ignore him, and that was entirely by design. Secret number 19. The studio expected a flop. Here is something the success story tends to obscure. Before Red Dawn opened, MGM was bracing for disaster. Internal concerns ran deep. Executives felt the premise was too politically charged, too intense, and too niche to find a mainstream audience. Marketing teams struggled to figure out how to position a film about teenagers fighting a foreign invasion when Cold War tensions were already making people uncomfortable enough in their daily lives. There were genuine discussions about softening the marketing, about downplaying the political elements, about reframing the film as a straightforward action adventure to make it more palatable. Then the film opened, and audiences showed up in numbers that caught the studio completely off guard. The very things executives had been afraid of, the intensity, the political charge, the uncompromising tone, turned out to be exactly what audiences were hungry for. What was expected to be a commercial misfire became a genuine box office success. Sometimes the people closest to a product are the last ones to understand its power. Red Dawn proved that definitively. Secret number 20. An ending nearly rewritten. The ending of Red Dawn carries enormous emotional weight, but that memorial-style finale, that quiet, reflective tribute to the young fighters and their sacrifice, almost didn't exist. During post-production, alternative directions were explored, darker versions, more ambiguous finales, endings that left the fate of the character shrouded in uncertainty rather than offering any form of resolution or tribute. Had any of those directions been chosen, the film's legacy would look fundamentally different today. The memorial ending transforms everything. Instead of closing on one final battle or a bleak fade to black, it shifts the film from action spectacle into something more solemn and emotionally resonant. A story not just about survival and combat, but about the cost of resistance and the weight of what was sacrificed. That tonal shift in the final minutes is precisely why Red Dawn endures as more than just an 80s war film. It gives the audience permission to feel the grief that the relentless action never allowed them to pause for. The restraint of those final moments is the film's most powerful choice, and it almost didn't make the cut. Secret number 21. Operation Red Dawn was real. Now, here, this is the one that stops people cold. In December 2003, the United States military launched the mission to capture Saddam Hussein from his underground hideout in Tikrit, Iraq, and they named it Operation Red Dawn. That was not a coincidence. Military planners who had grown up watching this film in the 1980s deliberately chose the name as a tribute, a conscious nod to a movie that had shaped their generation's understanding of conflict, resistance, and the stakes of warfare. They didn't just borrow the name of the film, either. The two target sites were labeled Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2, directly borrowing the battle cry that teenage audiences had been shouting since 1984. Fictional terminology from a mid-budget 1980s action movie was used to name one of the most significant military operations of the 21st century. Let that land for a moment. A movie. A story about teenagers fighting guerrilla warfare in the Colorado mountains. It so deeply imprinted itself on the minds of an entire generation of military professionals that when they were conducting real operations with real stakes in the real world, they reached back to it by name. Red Dawn didn't just reflect Cold War culture. It embedded itself so deeply into the American military psyche that it shaped the language used in actual combat operations 2 decades later. No other film can claim that legacy. Secret number 22. Could you kill a bunny? John Milius's casting process for the female roles was unlike anything Hollywood had seen before or has seen since. During auditions, he posed a single, deliberately uncomfortable question to every actress who walked through the door. Could you catch, dispatch, and skin a bunny if your survival depended on it? Note the specific word choice, not rabbit, bunny. The emotional discomfort that single word creates is intentional. It was the centerpiece of Milius's entire audition strategy, designed to catch every actress completely off guard and strip away every layer of performance polish in a single question. Those who hesitated were reportedly dismissed without further consideration. This wasn't a skills test. It was a psychological examination. Milius wanted to see how each actress responded under sudden, visceral pressure, the kind of raw emotional discomfort that no acting class can prepare you for. He was looking for grit, for steel, for authenticity that couldn't be rehearsed or manufactured. It was extreme, it was controversial, and by all accounts, it worked. The actresses who made it through brought a quality to their performances that a conventional audition process might never have surfaced. You can feel it in every scene they appear in, a groundedness that goes beyond technique, something earned, not learned. Secret number 23. It inspired militia movements. No filmmaker sets out to inspire real-world ideological movements, but the themes of Red Dawn, a small band of ordinary citizens resisting an occupying force, armed and unbowing, resonated far beyond the theater walls in ways that proved impossible to contain. In the decades following the film's release, survivalist and militia groups across the United States began adopting imagery, language, and themes directly from the movie. The Wolverine's name became a symbol for communities that saw themselves as defenders of personal liberty against centralized authority. The film's core narrative, ordinary people taking up arms when the institutions of power fail them, fit neatly into an existing ideological framework that these groups already inhabited. The cultural crossover raised deeply uncomfortable questions about the relationship between entertainment and ideology. The filmmakers never intended their work to serve as a blueprint or a rallying symbol for any real-world movement. Yet the themes proved powerful enough to transcend their fictional origins and take on lives of their own. in communities far removed from Hollywood. It remains one of the most striking and sobering examples of a movie's message being reinterpreted in ways its creators never imagined and never intended. Secret number 24. Cold War timing was perfect. Timing is everything in cinema, and Red Dawn arrived at what may have been the single most perfectly calibrated cultural moment in modern history for its specific premise. The summer of 1984 saw the Soviet Union boycott the Los Angeles Olympics.
Soviet Union will not be taking part in the 1984 Olympic Games to be held in Los Angeles.
A direct retaliation for the American boycott of the 1980 Moscow Games.
United States Olympic Committee voted to boycott the Summer Olympic Games in Moscow.
Cold War tensions were running at a fever pitch. The specter of nuclear conflict felt closer than it had in years. Every news cycle carried some new reminder that the two superpowers were circling each other with barely contained hostility. Audiences walked into theaters already saturated with that anxiety. They weren't watching a fictional scenario. They were watching their own fears given shape and narrative. The idea of a sudden foreign invasion of American soil didn't feel like science fiction in the summer of 1984. It felt like a dramatic extrapolation of something that was already terrifyingly plausible. Had this film been released even 2 or 3 years earlier or later, its impact would almost certainly have been diminished. The convergence of art and geopolitical reality created a viewing experience that was uniquely, unrepeatably powerful for its precise moment in time. The film didn't manufacture the fear. It gave the fear a story to live inside. Secret number 25. Why it still feels relevant. Here is the final secret, and in some ways, the most important one. What made Red Dawn powerful in 1984 is not the same thing that makes it powerful today, and that evolution is precisely what keeps it alive. Original audiences experienced it as a visceral Cold War thriller, a direct reflection of fears they were actively living with. Modern viewers bring entirely new interpretations to the same scenes, questions about occupation and resistance, about national identity, about what ordinary people are capable of when pushed to the absolute limit. The 2012 remake attempted to update the premise for a new generation, and while that version sparked its own debate, it did something valuable. It reignited widespread interest in the original and sent a new wave of viewers back to a film many had never seen but had heard referenced throughout their entire lives. That is extraordinary staying power. Every generation finds something new in Red Dawn to wrestle with. New questions about patriotism, about resistance, about what it means to stand your ground when everything familiar is stripped away. It is a film that keeps evolving in meaning even as the footage remains permanently fixed. 40 years later, Red Dawn is still being discovered, still being debated, still generating the same friction, the same passion, the same arguments about what it means and what it's worth. That kind of cultural longevity doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a film taps into something so fundamental about human fear, human resilience, and human defiance that no amount of time can make it feel finished. From permanently reshaping Hollywood's entire rating system to having its fictional battle cries spoken aloud during a real military operation to capture one of the most wanted men on the planet, Red Dawn achieved something that almost no film ever has. It stopped being entertainment and became part of the actual fabric of American culture. The frostbitten actors, the chaotic parachute drop, the abandoned love scenes, the deleted McDonald's sequence cut by real tragedy, the bunny audition, the gun on the desk, the studio bracing for a flop. Every one of these secrets reveals a production that was as intense, unpredictable, and genuinely dangerous as the film it was trying to make. So here's the question we're leaving you with today. Of all 25 secrets, which one genuinely surprised you the most? Was it the military operation, the Guinness World Record, the casting process, or something else entirely? Drop your answer in the comments right now. We read every single one, and if you've never seen Red Dawn, or haven't seen it since the 1980s, maybe it's time to revisit it, because now that you know what was happening behind the scenes, you'll never watch it the same way again. Like this video? Subscribe for more deep dives like this one, and we'll see you in the next one. Wolverines.